Views expressed during Impact Café are those of the panelists and do not represent the views of Franklin Energy or AM Conservation Group. Welcome to Impact Café, a podcast from Franklin Energy and AM Conservation Group that's dedicated to discussing all things related to energy innovation and impact in communities across North America. Our latest installment talks about leveraging diversity and inclusion to accelerate our nation's clean energy priorities. Research has shown that teams who place an intentional focus on diversity and inclusion are more creative and innovative. This means that regardless of the industry, a better understanding of diversity leads to stronger organizational performance and a more collaborative company culture. Today's episode features a discussion between Carla Walker-Miller from Walker-Miller Energy Services, Eve Noel from New York Power Authority, and Jackie Firsty with Blue Wave Solar, as they provide their insights on engaging diversity as a valued resource, leveraging a culture of inclusivity to achieve clean energy goals and resilience, as well as examining the role of a diverse workforce. Enjoy the
So it seems like we've kind of plateaued here on the counts of attendees. So good afternoon. I'm Jim Maddy. I'm the CEO of Franklin Energy and AM Conservation Group, and I wanted to welcome you to today's Impact Cafe. I'm excited to welcome our knowledgeable group of in the industry. The complexity of the transition to a clean energy future is enormous. It will require an extreme amount of diversity in ideas and experiences to get us to that place. There's clear research and in my own experience that shows when teams are built with an intentional focus on diversity and inclusion, they are more creative, innovative, and get more done. But how can we better understand this topic as we push towards leveraging a culture of inclusivity to achieve our goals? Without further ado, I'm going to introduce a great group of panelists and Tina, our Chief Administration Officer, to facilitate the discussion. And I'm excited to participate as well. So thank you all very much. And Tina, on to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. As Jim said, I'm Tina Semeton. I'm the Chief Administration Officer with Franklin Energy and AM Conservation Group. I have been with the organization for about 10 and a half years. And anyone who knows me knows that this is just a passion spot for me and something that I have enjoyed kind of growing in our organization through this process as well. So this topic is near and dear to me. Just a few housekeeping things. We have gathered some questions beforehand and tried to weave those into the questions that I have ready for the panelists. But if you do want to use the chat feature, by all means, please go ahead and do that. And we'll try to find time at the end. And we definitely will have this webinar being recorded and available within 24 hours after the session today. So with that, I want to introduce a great panel. I'm excited, and I just want to read a little bit of their bios to everybody here today. First up, I have Eve Noel. He is the Chief Strategy Officer and Senior Vice President of Strategy and Corporate Development at New York Power Authority. New York Power Authority is America's largest state power organization, with 16 generating facilities and over 1,400 circuit miles of transmission lines. Eve's scope of responsibilities includes strategic planning and internal consulting and sustainability. During his tenure at New York Power Authority, he's already led the development and adoption of Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is their 10-year strategic outlook, and it's meant to kind of meet the challenges facing the New Yorkers in the energy industry. One of the 5 foundational pillars and investment areas of strategy is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Eves came to New York Power Authority after a long career in strategy consulting at various firms, including Booz Allen Hamilton and Oliver Wyman. He received his MBA from Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and his bachelor's degree from Loyola University in Maryland. Eves is a passionate problem solver, communicator, and transformational leader who has developed diversity strategies to improve business. Probably most importantly, he's a first-generation Haitian American, a husband, and a father to 2 amazing girls. So thanks for being here today, Eve.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Next up, we have Carla Walker-Miller. Carla is the founder and CEO of Detroit-based Walker-Miller Energy Services, a core values-driven energy efficiency services company that changes lives through energy efficiency. An engineer by training, Carla started Walker-Miller Services 21 years ago to help address the lack of diversity in the utility supply chain. She pivoted to energy efficiency in the recession and has become a tireless advocate for DEI initiatives, aggressively inviting all people, particularly Black people and people of color, into this industry where they were woefully underrepresented. Carla believes an energy efficiency industry that reflects the rich diversity of our country is really going to expedite the reality of energy efficiency for all, which is an important driver for her. So thank you for being here today, Carla.
Thank you, Tina.
And finally, we have the pleasure of having Jackie Firsty here. She's a director of project development at Blue Wave, working specifically on the Massachusetts market. She also is a co-chair of mentorships and fellowships team of their social impact committee. She went to Northeastern University and benefited from the co-op program there. So she is acutely aware of the importance of mentorship, another area near and dear to my heart. So I love that. Jackie's also a member of NEWE, New England Women in Energy and Environment, which has provided a wonderful network of women and diverse perspectives for mentorship. Blue Wave has been working with ABE, the American Association of Blacks in Energy, for the last year, providing scholarship and educational opportunities. Welcome, Jackie. So this panel, as you can see, is diverse in so many ways, from their backgrounds to their race, to their gender, their life experiences, education, their roles within their jobs, and the communities that they're serving. So I think today's panel is really going to give us diversity, inclusion, and the impact that it's having on the clean energy. With our approach, we're kind of going to look at what's happened, what we're currently doing, and also looking ahead, probably most importantly, to give everyone ideas of things that we could be doing based on your experiences. But just a quick recap. I mean, when you think about things and what brought us here today, right? You look at 2020, and that really was the 56th year of the enactment of the Civil Rights Act. And I thought it was so important to call that out because that act prohibited discrimination based on race and color, religion, sex, national origin, and later sexual orientation and gender identity. But yet 2020 is going to go down in the history books as a tipping point for some of the highest amount of civil rights violations with the murder of George Floyd and others. So as we talk about, we've come so far, and each of us in our own way is trying to individually move the needle. We have such a long way to go yet to make sure that we bring inclusivity and, diminish some of the diversity. So really looking forward to the questions. Kind of want to start off with the lightning round. Carla, we'll start with you. What I wanted to do is just kind of have each of you talk about how did you get into the energy sector, just so people can get to know you a bit better. And based on the topic today, what are some of your experiences early on in the energy field?
Thanks, Tina. Interestingly enough, I fell into the energy industry, period. I was one of the dumbest engineers probably to ever graduate, honestly, with an engineering degree from Tennessee State University and HBCU. And way before I graduated, I knew that I could not be a design engineer. And I was invited to Westinghouse, which in those days, Westinghouse and GE were basically designing and populating the transmission and distribution industry. So I stayed with in corporate America for a few years before starting my own business. And during the recession, I pivoted from being a supplier of utility T&D equipment to the energy efficiency services industry. And as I was thinking about your question, I remembered one thing. When the energy efficiency, the enabling legislation was passed here in Michigan, I was totally sold on energy efficiency as my next core business. But when the RFPs came out, we didn't have the context to even understand what an implementation contractor did. We were considered ourselves energy people, but as you know, the industry is very specified, very prescribed. And DTE, a buyer from DTE, suggested that we join a team that included DMVGL and Franklin. And that is really how we landed in the energy efficiency industry. We couldn't find our way, even though we knew where we wanted to be and we knew what business was out there. Alone, we still could not find our way into the energy efficiency industry. And I think that in and of itself is instructive,
Yeah,
right?
it absolutely is. And just interesting that the utility kind of helped to make that step forward for you. Obviously,
Absolutely.
something that's becoming more and more important.
Absolutely.
Eve, how about you? How did you fall into this industry and what were some of your early experiences with diversity and inclusion?
I think it's a good one. So I'm a classic middle child, sort of always looking for, some people might say attention, some people might say looking for impact, looking for ways to make impact. And I've always been attracted to heavy industry, if you will, like actually putting steel in the ground and actually having an impact and seeing, like, delivering product. So that naturally led me to being attracted to the energy industry. And coming out of school, it was an opportunity for me to actually be a part of an industry that sort of met the need of putting steel in the ground, and also a global industry that had, I had aspirations of going abroad, which I later did. And I knew that, energy is one of the places where no matter where you go, you're going to have to use it and need it. So my early days in the industry was sort of provide a lot of impetus behind my desire now to drive additional diversity into the industry. I spend a fair amount of my time being one of, right, or the other. And so much of your early days are defined by the networks and the connections and the mentorship opportunities that we talked about earlier. And I know that because of the other status, I sort of had challenges there. And my goal is to sort of remove those barriers, remove those challenges for the generations that are following.
I love that. And I think, when we talk about this, it pivots really great to Jackie. You're telling us how you fell into this industry too, but that mentorship and being able to make sure that we're paying it forward. Those are the big things that start to move change. So thank you for that, Eve. Jackie, from your perspective, how did you come into this industry and what have been your initial experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd say maybe it was a more directed fall into the industry. I pretty much have known I wanted to be in clean energy since I was in middle school. It's been a passion of mine for a very long time. And part of what really helped start that passion and see, wow, this is something that could be a career, was an early mentorship opportunity. I got to do it was called STEM program. And I grew up, I was talking to Eve about this, I grew up in Yonkers, New York, which is a very diverse community and was considered an underserved community. So we had the opportunity in middle school to go to a STEM program at a nearby college in Albany and study lots of different STEM classes. And so the program that I ended up choosing, the track was Go Green. So I got to learn about clean energy, solar, got to visit a wind turbine, got to build a passive greenhouse model, 4 feet tall kind of situation with a green roof, passive solar design, and really got to see how there's a lot of different pieces in the clean energy industry that you can learn about and you can be involved in and have a career in. And there was really no going back after that. So when I went to Northeastern, I studied environmental science. Actually started out as a business major, but I thought, hey, let me sell solar panels. That sounds right. And then I realized I would like more technical experience and learn more about the context of our environment to really know why clean energy is the right decision and so important to everyone. And so I pretty much knew from the beginning that clean energy was what I wanted to do. So got to take a lot of really awesome opportunities at Northeastern to study it and to work in the space. I worked at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center for my first co-op experience. I know we mentioned that it's a 6-month-long internship program that Northeastern runs. So I got to work on early stage investing in clean tech startups in Massachusetts on my first experience. I got to go to Costa Rica and work at a permaculture or a sustainable agriculture farm to really be in a rural community, because I've always grown up and lived in a city, really see how important energy is, especially in rural communities. You don't necessarily have access to it. And so it's not just about cleaner energy, but it's also access to energy that I find so important. And I see clean energy having a much more having much more of an impact on than just, the centralized energy systems we have currently. And yeah, now, and then my third experience, I got to work at Blue Wave doing solar development, and that's where I still currently am for the past 3 years. And it's been a really amazing experience to kind of see a lot of different pieces of the industry and really see how diversity and being a woman in the space, there's a lot of white men in the space, both in the investment side and early stage startups, as well as in the energy development space. So it's been a really interesting experience. I acknowledge the fact that I am a white woman, so there's a different set of experiences that I've had than if I was a woman of color. But it definitely is still something that in some places you do feel like in other. And I've been really lucky to have a lot of support and mentorship where that's not the case as much as I know it could have been. So
I love that. I love that. And it's true, and that's why your perspectives are so interesting, because you are coming at it from a very different viewpoint. And, when we talk about all people, and I know Carla had this in hers too, it's really making sure that we're broadening it, not just to people of color, or, it's to look at women and disabilities and all of those sorts of things. We as leaders are responsible to make sure that we are being inclusive of all. So that was great, guys. Thank you so much. So, more specific questions. And I think I'm going to start with Eve, as you kind of led strategy and corporate development just in the US, right? Why is inclusion important? And, as you think about it, like, is New York, are they ahead of us in other states? I mean, is this a thing that people are doing and talk about, or are they at the same space? Like, do they need improvement too? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's also a good question. And I'd like to break it up into two, right? So the first question about diversity, equity, inclusion, is it important? And I think why is it important? I think you can go back to first principles, like the core, like we are literally human beings and our interactions with one another. And as a function of social equity and fairness, we need to interact with each other on a very basic principle of fairness, right? So that's why, diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. Just pure fairness. Like, we live in society and we've got to sort of get along, to use an overused expression. Then to talk about sort of whether New York is ahead or not, I think like what I'd like to talk about is like, diversity as a Haitian American who lives in New York. Diversity has always been a part of my life and a core sort of, I've always said it's been a shield and sword for as I battle through the world. Like, it has supported me. I think you expand that out to all of my experience and the organization that I work at, NYPA, just gone through as part of our Vision 2030 strategy, a value exercise, and diversity was one of the core values of our organization. Specifically, we said, right, I want to use the exact word. We draw strength from our diversity. Everyone contributes and everyone belongs. And that is not something that our leadership has said. That's not something that our managers have said. That is something that the entire organization has said. And that's why it's so crafted and very well stated there. So I won't sort of conjecture as to whether New York's ahead or beyond. I will say that at the New York Power Authority, one of the things that I'm really passionate about and been impressed by is the Power Authority's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and codified in our values.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, because as organizations, if we commit to making sure that we're creating this environment, that's really where the change starts to happen. We have to, as leaders, lead by example, commit to it, and live it. It's one thing to say it, but living it is a whole different thing. So that's perfect. And it kind of leads me, Carla, I'd love to tap into you, for this next question, because as a business owner, wow, the power that you can have with trying to move the needle in this. But as a business owner in energy efficiency field, how has inclusivity played into it? And I want to kind of feed in another question to this, and I know it's a lot, so I'll repeat if we need to, but it just came in, so I want to make sure that we talk about it. But how do you handle getting people excited and engaged in energy efficiency and making sure that we're being inclusive, even in low income areas where people have issues even paying their electric bills, right? So it's such a big thing that we can impact here. So love to hear your perspective.
So when I mentioned my interest in energy efficiency, even when the market was first formalized, codified in the state of Michigan, my interest was actually driven by the fact of the fact that I was fearful for low income and asset limited communities. Because at that time we were talking in 2008, we were talking about all the investment that needed to be made to the infrastructure. We knew it needed to be two-way communication. We knew it needed to be much smarter. We knew it needed to be more faster and more reliable. And to me, all that added up to expensive. And there's only one way utilities make improvements, and that is the ratepayers. So my fear that energy was going to be much, much more expensive for asset limited communities and families drove much of my interest. And because energy is such a burden, the cost of energy, especially if you consider it holistically, electricity, water, and gas, the percentage that that burden places on asset limited families, it is absolutely necessary that they be involved as participants in these energy efficiency programs, but also as leaders, as employees and employers. One of our core values is inclusive stewardship. Again, our team should, and all teams should, reflect the diversity of the country. But also we are stewards. We absolutely have to be stewards of the resources. And as stewards of the money that ratepayers pay utilities, we absolutely have to drive the benefits of energy efficiency. So we make it a point to recruit aggressively. In our Detroit-based location, we have a goal of 60% Detroit team members. And we do that in every place that we implement a contract. We push the dollars, we push the spend, we push the jobs locally. And Tina, just as we learn the industry, one of the things that large businesses do is we have this thing called a back office that sucks up all the air in the room, right? We send our marketing to the back office, we send our procurement to the back office. All those things should be occurring locally so that those dollars spent benefit the people and the businesses that are supporting the industry and the market. And that also allows us to invite people who did not come through as engineers and didn't have a connection, an organic connection to the energy industry. It allows us to create an on-ramp so that everyone can be involved in the energy industry, and every single company and every single people leader and every single team should be committed to energy efficiency for all.
Yeah, and I love that. And you kind of talk about that on-ramp. I love that analogy of it because I've always viewed it too of, a training and development program and all of those sorts of things that are so important. So maybe the people that didn't have the education, you can develop them, you can grow them and create futures for them. So that's perfect. And, this kind of tags in, Jackie, I want to pull you into this too, because your experience with the mentorship programs and the scholarships and that ability, to engage people. I know there's huge business cases out there. And Jim Maddie talked about this when he introed too, of organizations that have higher level of engagements, have better production, they have lower safety issues, they have all of these things, there's a bottom line impact to all of this. What can you share with us from your experiences of how, engaged employees, how you've pulled, included people to drive up engagement and make sure that they are, pulled into the workforce?
That's a great question, and it's so important. I mean, if your employees aren't engaged, you're not going to have the best product. You're not going to have perspectives that are involved in decision making that make projects, for me, projects better, make them successful, make them actually successful for people who need it. Like Carla was speaking about, it's something that that we do at Blue Wave is, we have community solar projects, and we're focused on low income community solar, especially in Massachusetts. I mean, it's something we're working on with state policymakers to provide a structure. They have, created in the SMART program an opportunity for low income community solar that is, specifically for environmental justice communities throughout the state. But the issue is how do we do it? How do we physically get these bill credits for solar clean energy that's at a discount to these low income communities? And so that's something that we've worked on as a company very closely for the past few years, and even more than the past few years. But it's really coming to a head now with the SMART program. And it's something that, employees are engaged when they know that the communities that they live in are actually being served, right? I mean, some of our projects are in states that we don't live in. Some of our community solar programs are in states we don't live in, but a lot of them are where we live, right? We have employees that are not just in Massachusetts. We have employees in Maine. We have employees in California. We have employees in South Africa. I mean, we're all over, and so it's important that you really do feel connected to the work that you're doing, and that it's tangible. And so I think that employee engagement is really important. And yeah, for me, I know personally that being engaged as an employee has looked like a lot of different things. I mean, we have a culture club, right? Is making sure that people, even in remote environments, are feeling, connected, have opportunities to meet each other, spend time together, and really be working on this mission together. Everyone's really mission driven at Blue Wave. But also, starting out at Blue Wave, when I first got hired full time, my boss at the time, he said to me in our, conversation about hiring that, it was really important to him that I was a woman in development, being a developer, not just at a development company, like being one of the developers. Like there aren't a lot of women in the space going to permitting meetings and going and negotiating leases. Like that's not something that is common in the field, and it should be. And they wanted to support my growth and development in the space, and like to start off at a company and knowing that support is there, not just as an employee, but like as a woman, as a young woman, is really important and really helps, you feel included and engaged. So I think coming from management, that's really, really important for especially, analysts, new employees, and like, junior level employees coming into companies, whatever their background is. It's really important to know that they're not just being engaged as an employee, but as who they are and what they're bringing to the table that may be different. So.
That's awesome. And I think since you felt that pull in, right, that it's important to hear your voice at the table as a woman or as any individual, minority. You have a whole different viewpoint that you're able to share. And I think, organizations that have embraced this, I've always said, are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of those that are not, because you make better decisions when you have more diverse input. You really do. So I love hearing that. And I think it's a great way to engage people, is to hold firm to getting different people sitting at the table and truly actively listening to their voice, right? It's perfect. Well, good. I know we've got some questions coming in here too, so I'm going to keep rolling through the questions. When we talk about where we sit today, we still have economic and energy insecurities. We really do. You look at the unemployment rate. And I know in 2020, the unemployment rate for African Americans, for example, in the United States was at 11.4%, which was 1.4 times the national average. So there is still so much that we can be doing. When we look at this, I kind of want to talk about, and maybe each of you could share one of the things that you have done to drive different candidates either coming in or drive changes to your hiring practices or recruitment practices, right? To make a difference in some of these things. Why don't we start with you, Jackie?
Yeah, happy to speak about this. I was, fortunate enough to be involved in a lot of hiring that happened and over the past year at the company, and really get to make sure that we're looking at things from a diverse perspective. And part of that was, the company knowing you're the only woman on the development team right now, and it's really important that we have your perspective on these decisions, because you have a different perspective and in this hiring process. So I will say that kudos to Blue Wave for including me in these decisions, and can say, we have hired more diverse candidates over the past year or so. We actually released a little over a year ago, after George Floyd's murder, which was awful. We realized as a company, we're a B Corp, we're really mission driven. We really care about diversity and inclusion, but we need to actually be holding ourselves accountable. So, we released an anti-racist action plan on our website, and we've been following that over the past year. We're not done, but we've made a lot of progress, and some of that includes hiring. I think our senior executive team right now, we're almost at 50%. It's not quite 50%. You still started out with mostly white men, and we're shifting things. Gotta right that ship, because that's generally been the direction that it's been being driven by. And again, going back to your comments, Tina, on having diverse perspectives really makes the project better. I think we just want to avoid groupthink, right? If people have had very similar experiences, it doesn't matter who those people are, right? If they've had similar experiences, they're not bringing the best perspectives to the table to problem solve. And so it's just important to make sure that you have a lot of diverse perspectives at those decision making points. And so we've worked a lot on that, on hiring. We've really focused on mentorship and fellowship opportunities, working with other organizations to expand our network. Because as a group, if your company is not diverse, you're not going to have diverse networks either. And that's something that's really important and not always focused on. If everyone who you reach out to, who is also similar and has similar experiences, you're not really helping by bringing those people in and really opening up your perspective. So we've worked with, as you mentioned, the American Association of Blacks in Energy, or we call it AID for short. And I'll probably say that for the rest of the experience here. But we've worked on network with them to provide scholarship funding for an energy justice scholarship with Shalonda Baker at Northeastern University. We've also provided educational videos that we've created so that they can be used by students, classrooms across Boston. And we've also worked with En Route and Bottom Line and the Boston Private Industry Council, all of which really support high school students in lower income communities, first generation college students, people of color. And we've worked with them to provide internship opportunities. We've, since last year, had 6 interns so far through those organizations. We've also done a few job shadow days, virtually, of course, and also reviewed resumes for students, and really just trying to have a whole company effort to really support not just candidates for jobs, but students who need to be educated in the field in order to get these jobs, and also provide career opportunities like internships. So they don't just say, okay, cool, I studied this, but then they don't have a network of people or experience, which we all know is so important to get into any industry, especially now. So it's something that we've really been focused on, are very proud of how far we've come, but want to stay accountable to keep doing more.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Carla, I know you and I have talked about this too, of how we've changed, practices and what we're doing. What else, what other techniques and, changes have you made to your recruitment and hiring practices?
Well, one of the things that we've done is we don't solely depend on electronic recruiting, because by making LinkedIn and Glassdoor, the major online recruiting entities, your only entry with that, and then relationships. And as Jackie said, we know that the people who are already in the companies are largely white men. And so they are going to be recruiting like white men. Because of the digital divide, if all of our opportunities are electronic, then we're still not reaching a large segment of a very, very diverse community. So, with the philosophy of you're either intentionally inclusive or you are unintentionally exclusive. If we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always had. And we are absolutely trying to disrupt that. So in different communities, we go to different trusted community partners and ask for referrals for people who are already in different industries. When you think about the energy efficiency industry, what's so wonderful about it is the educational attainment is not a real barrier because of the kind of work we're doing. We are retrofitting, we are teaching. If I can teach you to calculate the area of a circle, I can teach you to be an energy auditor, right? And what that means is I can go into any community in this country and recruit really wonderful people. So let's go into the communities in this country and recruit really wonderful people, as opposed to sitting behind a computer and just taking the people that have stable access to the internet, which is basically, what we do. In our headquarters office, we've actually just posted jobs and allowed people to walk in off the street And on our advertisements, we say we want returning citizens. Yes, returning citizens, people who have done time in the criminal justice system. We want people who are long-term unemployed. We want people living with disabilities. We want people who identify as LGBTQ. So people are invited into industries. If you look at the history of this country, traditionally, there's a reason that different ethnicities fall into different occupations, right? So let's invite all ethnicities into energy and energy efficiency, and let's go out of our way to make it easy for them to take us up on that invitation.
And what a great thing that could happen, right? In our industry that we're trying to grow and spread the word about. We've got more people, of diverse backgrounds spreading the word. It really can make a bigger impact. Thank you. Eve, how about you? Anything to add of what you guys have done in the New York area?
Sure. So I'm gonna take this a little unconventional approach. I think like the first thing that I think that I was really impressed by is they stopped and listened. With all of the social unrest that occurred and sort of the distraught that was happening within our employee base, we sort of took a moment and said, hey, let's listen to our employees in like these open, non-judgment zone areas. And I think that provided me, like at the time I was a new employee at NYPA, so it provided me sort of a look into an organization, because all organizations have long histories and people who've been there 30, 40 years who remembers when, and like having an opportunity to listen to our employees and essentially strategize ways of making the current environment better was a great opportunity. So I'd say, like, what have we done? We stopped and we listened. And after listening, what did we hear? We heard three things. All our employees are looking for transparency, just a little bit of ability to see into the process around recruiting, around promotion, around and even retirement. Like they just wanted a little bit more transparency. What did they also want? They wanted a network, right? Because they wanted to be able to connect with leaders that weren't necessarily their line leaders, that were sort of around the organization, just so that they could have a better view as to what are the different opportunities that were going on within the organization. And this gets to the recruiting question, like, how do you find out about a job? It's through your network and going out there. And then the final thing that they asked for is literally access. They wanted to be able to walk into sort of our leadership's offices and say, hey, these are the things that we find, these are the things that are important to us, and have that conversation. And we've made, and NYPA in NYPA standard responded to those requests with a 10-point diversity, equity, and inclusion plan that you can find on our website. And it was a very well thought out plan that took a lot of iteration between the organization and leadership and the organization in order to get to these 10 plans. And I won't go through all the particular details of the 10-point plan, but what I will say is it boiled down to three things, right? One, we wanted to be a better employer, right? Providing opportunities for our employees so that they could bring to their best selves to work, and they can be creative, they can be innovative, they can be committed, because we've got the climate challenge is a massive problem that we're facing, and we need commitment. So committed. So them to be committed and passionate about the issues that to face climate challenge. Also, we committed to being a better buyer. We're literally reaching out to sort of what were the organizations that we were investing in? What were the WMBEs, and like our commitment to them? How could we increase their representation in the entire supply chain, right? So better employees, better buyer. And then finally, we want to be better neighbors. Really thinking about what are the commitments that we can make to the community at large that that our plants and facilities and our workers are operating in. Some of the examples of that is like we put together a P-Tech internship program where we're also offering college scholarships. And then finally, we're offering opportunities for our employees to give back to communities through service pro. So we listened, we put a plan together around sort of addressing the concerns, and we're moving against that plan right now.
I love that. And you were kind of hitting on, making sure that we did listening sessions too. And man, did I learn a lot. I got almost emotional at every one of them because I was learning about how people were feeling about certain things that I just wasn't aware of. And so what a great opportunity for leaders to learn. But you commented on a couple of things that I really think does get at, us creating a psychological safe place so people can be their authentic selves, right? That's the key. We need to allow people to bring all of their differences to the table and use that as a learning and growth opportunity as an organization. And it really sounds like you guys have done that. That is amazing. One of the questions that came in that I think is really important, and Eve, since you're talking about this, do you have some key metrics that you guys kind of monitor, engage, and look at?
So across yes. So we have key measures.
I knew the answer was going to be yes, but can you share a couple of those with us?
So I mean, like we're going through a process right now of putting those measures in our sustainability plan and go for it. But obviously, one of the great measures is around since we're talking about hiring, is applicant tracking. Like who's actually responding to the applications. How are they making throughout how are they getting through the cycle between sort of recruiting, interviewing, onboarding, all the way their progress throughout the process, and then retirement. So those are one of the key measures that we're keeping track of, specifically around hiring. Perfect. We're also keeping track of like, what are the diverse outlets that we're using? What are the job boards that we're posting on? Where can we go? We've also sort of like how many relationships and partnerships with organizations like the American Association for Blacks in Energy that can we be a part of? So yes, we're measuring it and we're tracking our progress against it.
I love it. I love it. Kind of changing directions a little bit here. Carla, I'd love to, again, I think from a business owner perspective, there's probably so much rattling around in your head on a daily basis with ideas that you have, but what in this area, what is keeping you up at night? What are the things that you really think, the individuals listening today and participants, what can we do to help, or where do we need to focus? What are some of those things?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things keeping me up at night is as a Black company, Black and woman-owned, people think that we don't struggle for diversity. And even as a Black company, it is important for us to have representation from all diversity categories. It's important for us to have white men. It's important for us to have Hispanic people. It's important for us to have every single classification. So we are absolutely very, very intentional about recruiting, again, the rich diversity that exists in the country. And what keeps me up at night is the experience that our team has in this industry. 3 years ago, it was hard to even have a discussion and use the word equity. 3 years ago, I remember sitting in a conference planning session and wanting a session on equity. And there was this great fear. And when we finally had it, the people who attended were the people that already get diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? The people who already understand and support it. And we're at a different place now where most people of goodwill are at least open to the conversation and have accepted the necessity that it's not just good for the industry, it's good for the country, the world, and it's good for profit. How can you argue against more diverse organizations being more profitable? But again, what keeps me up at night is our very ethnically diverse team having a great experience in an industry that is not diverse at all. And if I drill down to my particular company, we are very intentional about vulnerability and transplant the rural Illinois Trump supporter to feel that they have a voice and they can bring themselves to our company too. So how do we create a culture where, you know, when we talk about bringing our whole selves and being our authentic selves, I think for most of us, just a picture of a very ethnic person pops up, right? Can that person? Well, in my company, I want the whitest person in my company to feel as welcome and as open and as supported as someone that looks exactly like me. And it is really critical that we create that type of environment across the board because the industry needs it.
That's perfect. You know, it's always, they say like a lot of people look to the leadership in organizations and they want to see themselves in the picture of the leadership. So that goes a lot, I think, to what you're saying is, you know, you have to be able to have different, you know, diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences and diverse makeups to paint that picture, that tapestry. Good. Jackie, I kind of want to jump to you with a question now that just came in. One of the things that they asked was, what are the top 3 to 5 things that maybe an organization can start doing if they're just sort of starting on this D&I journey? Like maybe they're not comfortable having these conversations yet that Carla was talking about. Do you have a couple of things that you could say like, hey, here are 3 things that you think people could start doing to start on this
Great question.
journey?
And I'm glad you asked me because I do feel like that's some, you know, Blue Wave, we're like not at the very beginning, but it is something that we more recently started from a more coalesced perspective, right? I mean, it's always been thoughts, and now we officially start, you know, our social impact committee, like being a committee that exists and has multiple arms and has a budget, you know, those are things that didn't always happen, didn't always exist at Blue Wave. And so to actually have that is newer. It's, you know, a little over a year at this point. So I definitely can speak to the experience of trying to help set this up at Blue Wave. And, you know, I think first thing, you know, that we, you know, were told and got a lot of input on was it's really important to kind of like set the baseline, right? Take inventory of where your company's at right now, right? You can't say, oh, we really want to improve, you know, like who we're hiring at this company. But like, first of all, who do we have at the company, right? Like what is our current baseline? What are we going to be comparing that to in 1 year's time? And really setting some, they don't have to be really high pledges or anything, but just setting what the baseline is and saying, we want to, you know, aim to hire, you know, improve that to 25%. Maybe we're only at, but if we're only at like 2% right now, that might be too much of a jump, right? So really trying to set those baselines first and make sure it's something that's achievable, because the only way you're going to maintain momentum is if you're actually, you know, hitting goals. They don't have to be big goals for you to hit them, but to keep moving and keep going and make it something that doesn't feel like something that's huge for the company to buy in to, right? Because if you're saying we need to hit like 80% change over a year, you know, the leadership might say, well, we can't do that. You're asking for too much. And then you don't get anywhere. So small steps really do add up and are worthwhile. A lot of the, you know, fellowship opportunities we've done, some of the partnerships, they're all a bunch of individual partnerships, but when you look at them together, you know, we have made a lot of impact, and it doesn't have to be a huge dollar amount. It could be, I really would say like the best way to start is to start looking around your community and saying what kind of organizations already exist that are doing work that I think is cool. Because we started out with this plan saying, we want to run internship programs. We want to do this. We want to have a mentorship program. I was like, wait a second, let's take a step back. Who's doing this in our community that we can piggyback off of really and support and say, well, we would like to, you know, have one of your interns. Maybe we don't have to create a program though. Like you have something set up already. And that's the whole point, right? Is supporting organizations that are focused on diversity and inclusion is also a huge way to support diversity and inclusion, right? It's not like, oh, I have to do it all by myself. So I think that's a huge piece that was for us at first. We had to kind of recalibrate when we were thinking about it. Let's do everything and take a step back and say, okay, we can't do everything at first. And how do we really take smaller steps? And I think, Carla, something that you said that I really wanted to acknowledge was it's not just about hiring candidates. And that is something that, you know, at the beginning it is a focus, right? You have to bring people in, but what's really, really important in that next step is actual retention and creating an environment that people want to be in. Because who cares if you bring someone in and they are not having a good time and they're not able to bring their full self and they want to leave? You know, that's not that's not good. And that's something that I think about a lot. Even at Blue Wave, we have a culture that has a lot of people who have a lot of similar interests. Even if, you're diverse in how you look, your life experiences maybe have been very similar, and that can create an exclusive kind of environment. And that's something that we're working on as well. And so that I think that it's really important to take a look at not just, what do the people in the room look like, but what have their experiences been, and kind of digging in that next step. So that might be a next step outside of the first 3 to 5, but I think setting a baseline, taking some small steps and looking around in your community and seeing what people are already doing, the work that you would like to implement, are really great, start.
I think that was really well said, Jackie. Like sometimes people think it's all too big, right? And what's that saying? Like, you can't eat an elephant in one bite, right? You have to take it in small bites. And that really is it. I mean, that's how change happens. You just kind of small steps forward, keep bringing people in as you go. And all of a sudden you look back and in a year, you have impacted a lot of different individuals. I love that. Carla, do you have anything to add? 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 ideas of what people can do if they're starting on this diversity and inclusion journey?
I think Jackie really hit it right on. The inventory, look at yourself, right? Look inward first. Where are you? Because it doesn't take a whole lot for most organizations to say, wow, we have a lot of work to do. But, and not reinventing the wheel. There are organizations and entities who have been at this for decades, and they know how to do this work. So as energy efficiency experts, we are experts, right? We know we have a particular expertise, and there are entities that have this expertise. So if you really are serious, engage some of them. And if you have any diversity in your organization, listen to the people who are with you right now and respect their experiences, honor their experiences, and learn from their experiences. One of the things that I think about all the time is, you talked about the diversity of this panel, where there's some age diversity in this panel too. I came into the energy industry in the 80s, and much of my passion is informed by the trauma that I have undertaken over years of being the diversity without having the experience of the equity or the inclusion. So what Jackie said about hiring diverse teams and expecting them to totally assimilate into the organization that you have right now is a recipe for disaster. So if you are going to embark on, if there are companies that want to stay white male, stay white male. But if you are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would encourage you to be courageous. Just be courageous. We talk about renewable resources. I like to quote myself, and my favorite quote is, courage is a renewable resource. And if you're embarking on this journey, you have to be courageous, because you are going against the norm. You are going against the standards. You are going against tradition. You're going against so many things that have staying power. And I think one of the most important things you can do is to have a strong, committed champion at the top of your organization, supported by committed teams. Otherwise, there are going to be these fights within the corporation where you're talking about these people don't care about anything but diversity. They don't care about performance. We're going to bring our fears instead of our hopes and our commitments if we don't have the right team in place to address the issue.
I think that is a really great point. And I remember being at Shades of Green conference with you years ago, and we were talking about the fact that organizations that, are literally putting their money where their mouth is and putting someone in place to make sure that they are committed to this. And it is a focal point of, I heard some of you say you brought it into your core values and you brought it into the strategy of your company. Those are the change makers. So perfect. Eve, how about you? Do you have anything to add to that list of 5? I know it's growing here. So
I wrote down, and everything that I wrote down has been said by Jackie and Carla. So I won't add anything to what you. I won't add anything more to the list of what you should do. I think listen, understand leadership commitment, make the investment, and invest in infrastructure are all very important pieces. What I will add is what not to do. If your organization happens to have a diverse member, don't add this as a job onto that. This is not a job for that person. They've been hired to do a very specific thing, and in a very competitive industry, they need to focus on that. If your organization would like to embark on this journey, they need to do what they do for all other new initiatives. decide to set aside resources and bring in a separate set of, bring in somebody dedicated to do that work. I'm not saying that the like, as a diverse employee, I wasn't at every meeting that I could possibly be at and showing commitment and doing work, but it wasn't my full-time job. And an organization needs to have someone who, as a full-time job, working on this, if this is the road that they decide to embark on.
I love that. That's a really great example. And sometimes telling people points to do, it's better off telling them what not to do. And that is a perfect point to add in. And I think the only other one I'd add to it too is, and Jackie, you kind of touched on this, but don't reinvent the wheel. There are so many great people, like all of you on the phone line today, that have been doing these things, that have been kind of paving the way. And the power of reaching out, networking, and connecting is another source of learning for organizations. So I always say, make sure to reach out to those that are already doing some of this stuff too. That's really good. I know these questions keep flying in, and I'm trying to keep them up too. I know we have a couple minutes here yet. One question, Carla, I'll give this to you. It's, how do you balance the idea of hiring the right person in the right position versus hiring based on core values, train and develop?
So I don't see it as balance at all. We do both. We are a core values driven team, and we don't care how good you are at engineering or IT if you are a jerk. I am not going to stress my team out by having them deal with people who are just hard to deal with. So we hire based on core values, and then we train for skills. And believe it or not, you can hire core values fits who are diverse and who are incredible at their jobs. We don't see it as a balance at all. Every day we reject people just because they stress us out in the interview process, or they have inclinations that are just not positive to delivering the extraordinary experiences we as a company strive to deliver, and that we as individuals deserve to experience every day. So I think you make it a commitment. You set rules about what your, what the best case is for your company. And for us, the best case is to hire great people that think the way we do about empowering other people and enriching communities.
I love that. That is great. Well, I know we're getting to the end, and I'd like to kind of, maybe end this with some, we'll go around the horn here. And I want to give each of you just an opportunity to kind of, what is, some of the optimism? What are some of the good things that you see happening? And how can we kind of stay in this fight together? What are some things that we can do that you're seeing that are happening out there? Carla, we'll start with you.
To me, this conversation is a good thing. Before last May 25th, we would not have had this particular conversation with this level of authenticity this way. So just the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion are business discussions right now make me optimistic. The fact that climate change, we're talking about it, we're moving to address it with urgency. I think that, what we're facing right now is all upside, and we have the opportunity to just build something really, really amazing that really addresses all the issues that we have, and moving forward into the future in a way that is positive and inclusive and affirming and effective.
Wonderful. Jackie, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm extremely optimistic. I've only been in this space for, a short time. And so I feel like I have almost been lucky to kind of already be involved when there's more momentum, right? Like Carla mentioned, being in the industry since the 80s, I imagine it was very different. And so I think I'm optimistic because I see, everyone in my generation and younger generations, climate change and environmental justice are not even, they're the same thing at this point. I mean, the more you hear conversations now, and you hear conversation about climate change way more than I even heard it in college, right? I mean, it's already becoming so much more of a focus. And at this point, I'm also seeing that focus include environmental justice and including, people of color and communities of color that are underserved and more vulnerable due to climate change. I mean, it's just part of the same conversation, part of the same sentence. And that to me, it makes me really optimistic. And knowing that, I can work at a company and see the white male leadership buy in to this and say, yeah, we've got a lot to learn. Not just say, do what you need to do, but we have a lot to learn, and we want to give you guys the opportunity to grow and grow the company to include more diverse perspectives, and know that, you know, there's so much left to be done. Makes me optimistic because I've seen so many people join industry who look at me and look like me, and just kind of witnessing that happen and seeing, you know, climate change and environmental justice all being talked about at elementary school, high school. Like that's where this needs to be happening to make, you know, a better workforce coming in, and, you know, very shortly. So I just, that makes me optimistic.
Eve, you got a few seconds here. What are you thinking for the future?
I'm optimistic about our shared experience through this pandemic and our response to this pandemic, and how the focus on, you know, our health has gotten everybody thinking about, like, they're bigger and better, they're bigger and more important things than just we live in a community and we're all sort of linked and tied together. And I think that story and that conversation is demonstrating a maturity that I didn't see when I was growing up. And I'm optimistic that it's just going to get even better as time progresses.
I love it. Well, that brings us to time here. I cannot thank you guys enough. It was an honor for me to be able to moderate this session today. We're getting into areas that are uncomfortable conversations, and I couldn't be more happy that we're one of the organizations leaning into this and helping to connect partnerships, talk more about it, because it really is going to be a positive for all of us. So thank you for your time today. This webinar will be recorded and available in the next 24 hours for everybody. And let's keep it going. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all very much. Very, very well done. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us for Impact Café. Franklin Energy delivers more than 100 turnkey energy efficiency and grid optimization programs for utility partners across North America. We work alongside our sister company, AM Conservation Group, who manufactures and supplies more than 300 energy efficiency and water conservation products. We help our energy partners achieve their goals with solutions implemented by more than 1,300 energy experts. Watch out for our next Impact Café to join our ongoing conversation. To make sure you're always a part of the conversation, follow Franklin Energy on LinkedIn and Twitter for updates. See you at the next Impact Café.